Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. This week, Shawn Busse, Jay Goltz, and Liz Picarazzi discuss their succession options. And if they could go back in time, what advice they would give their early stage selves. Liz would tell herself to get some help with administrative tasks. Shawn would tell himself to find a mentor, although he's not sure he would have listened to the advice. And Jay would tell himself that there's an obvious solution to the chaos caused by fast growth. Plus, how Liz changed the narrative after Citibin's bout with bad publicity. And we have suggestions for a listener who asks, how do you know when it's time to quit the day job? Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations will let owners know they are not alone in facing challenges. Same thing with our daily newsletter, the 21 Hats Morning Report, which Inc. magazine recently named the best newsletter for business owners, and which you can subscribe to at 21hats.com, where you can also find transcripts of our podcast episodes and lots of other articles and interviews. Joining me this week on the podcast are regulars Shawn Busse, CEO of Kinesis, which is based in Portland, Oregon, and works with small businesses on marketing, culture, and strategy. Jay Goltz, whose companies in Chicago include a picture frame business, artist frame service, and a home furnishing store, Jason Home. And Liz Picarazzi, who is CEO of Citibin, which is based in Brooklyn, New York, and makes trash enclosures and package bins. The episode is titled, Here's My New Succession Plan. I Can't Die. Welcome, Shawn, Liz, and Jay. Thanks for being here. I want to start today by asking you kind of about the best advice you never got. Tell me, if you could go back to the early days of starting your business and deliver a message to the younger you just getting started, what would that advice be? Liz, can I start with you?
Absolutely. So I don't know if my advice is all that exciting, but it's definitely something that I could have used. And that's that I underestimated the amount of administrative work that goes into having a business. So when you register with the state and you get a tax ID number, you get put on a lot of different directories for various types of mail. Some of it seem kind of like solicitations, but a lot of it are various types of insurance, various types of sales forms. So when I started getting this mail, I was really overwhelmed with understanding the difference between even something like unemployment and disability. I know they're totally different things, but from a standpoint of knowing, how do I handle this? What do I need to know about this? How much do I need to pay? How do I get this set up? For me, I found that so unpleasant. And as I've said on the podcast before, anything administrative, I don't have very strong skills in that. So I actually had a box that I carried around with me for a few months with a lot of mail in it that were important things like sales tax. I was overwhelmed with it. I didn't like it. So if I could have had someone take me through what are the various, insurances, taxes that you need to get set up with, then when that mail started coming in, I wouldn't have felt as overwhelmed. In addition to that, annoyed. Because for me, it was like, wow, what an annoyance that I'm finally going out on my own and I'm starting this business and I'm already buried in paperwork. So that would be my type of advice. I don't know if there's some sort of advisor that can provide that sort of simple advice. I know there are things like SCORE and other city resources on how to start a business, but no one told me, and I didn't seem to have a resource for all of those additional admin things that you need to take charge of right away.
Who was doing your accounting? Who was doing the tax return and such at that point?
Well, I'm talking about like in the first 6 months or so.
I know, but my point being, usually if you have some kind of accountant, they could at least give you some guidance and some of that stuff you're talking about. I just questioned, in the beginning, did you not have an accountant at all?
You don't need one in the first 6 months necessarily, do you?
No, I didn't have it. I had a bookkeeper that was in my co-working space. And he was, helpful to a point, but, maybe that's it, is that have an accountant that can help take you through those things, not just from an explanatory perspective, but from an actual practitioner.
Well, and I can't help but wonder too, like we live in a very different time than when you started your business, Jay,
Yeah.
In terms of the administrative burden And Liz is in a state and a city that is like epic in terms of its bureaucracy. And I am too. I mean, that's sort of one of the perils of doing business in kind of more liberal cities is they love their fees and their taxes and their processes and permits. I mean, it has become Permitville crazy. So I think Liz brings up a really interesting point.
No, you're right. When I started, it was very different. I don't remember getting a bunch of mail with all this stuff. And you're right. It's changed over the years. It was 44 years ago.
Even on something like disability, if you don't pay that on time, you get a pretty big fine. So I think my disability bill was like $250 and I didn't pay it. And then I got fined $500.
Are you sure that was disability? Because disability is an insurance policy. I don't know who would be fining you for that. Did the state fine you for not having? I guess they could.
Yes. Yeah. At the time, it was through the state.
Oh,
and I tried to fight it, but I think they have those punitive measures in place for people like me.
They'd probably call them Liz rules. How can we get Liz?
It is really difficult. I mean, I think that, and I don't even know if the accountant's the right answer.
Yeah, I don't either.
Because it's so broad. It's not just the financial side. It's more of a compliance and rules that often fall out of the realm of accounting. It's really good advice, Liz.
I actually think it's a business opportunity as well, because if you can get in there with an up-and-coming small business at the beginning and, whether you're a lawyer or your accountant or some sort of advisor and help them through this, then, you can get longer-term business with helping them with that stuff, and you can get a lot of referrals.
I think there are places around the country, municipalities that have gotten better at this, and they have kind of created a, one-stop platform that lists all the things you need to do to get a business off the ground, that you can just go to one place and start checking them off. And I would like to think that will happen everywhere before too long. Liz, when you were throwing that mail in the box, were you throwing it into the box opened or unopened?
Mostly unopened.
That's not good.
I'm smart in a lot of ways, but that's not one of them.
I think Liz is really typical of an entrepreneur. I mean, I've lost some administrative resources because of maternity leave recently, and then I had one of my key people who handles operations go on an extended vacation. And so, I covered for them, which is kind of a joke. But I had a stack of mail that, a lot of it I didn't get to for a long time and finally got around to it. But it's hard, when you're focused on a vision and you're focused on where are we headed and the pace of everything and you're selling. This stuff is just a boat anchor around your neck.
I think that at some point it's about self-preservation and about keeping your head clear that sometimes ignorance is bliss, that she didn't open them because she couldn't deal with it. And I understand that. I respect that at some point you just get overwhelmed. So there's something called, I just made this up, managing your overwhelmness. Like maybe you just ignore a couple things because you just can't deal with it because it is overwhelming.
Shawn, same question to you. If you could go back in time and give yourself a piece of advice, what would it be?
So a question I have is, when you say back in time, are you saying to the very beginning?
I'm giving you some wiggle room. I want you to give the most interesting advice for whatever point in that earlier period that you think.
Could be last month.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
If I look back over my life, and then especially the last 25 years of being in business, the first 10 years were very different than the following 10 years. And so if I reflect on those first 10 years, the most critical piece of advice that no one ever gave me, and I don't know if I would have listened to it, but it would have been to get mentorship. I worked so hard at creating things that in hindsight were just super basic and easy if somebody had just kind of given me a playbook. I think as an early stage entrepreneur, you end up wasting a ton of energy and momentum trying to invent wheels that have already been invented. So I think mentorship and guidance from folks who've done it before, I think that would be the number one thing for Shawn in his 30s.
Well, you raise a good point, though. Do you think you would have been open to taking that advice you would have gotten from whatever mentors you found?
It's a great question. I was brought up in a time, not quite as far ago as Jay, but, where the dominant mindset was business is a fiercely competitive activity. You keep secrets. You keep your stuff to yourself. You don't ever admit your weakness. You don't share what you're doing because people could steal your stuff. So it's very much kind of a paranoia mindset around business. And you never talk about your financials. You never talk about what you make. And what I've learned over the years is that's just dumb. It doesn't help you at all. And so I think that has changed. I think people have become much more vulnerable and much more willing to share and realize the benefits of being honest and open about their shortcomings.
Jay, how about you? If you could go back in time, what advice would you give yourself?
There's no question this cost me literally, in the true sense of the word, literally millions of dollars. I was growing at 50% a year. And then finally I get to a bank and I'm going to borrow some money and I show my financials. I can remember this like yesterday. And I go, listen, my bottom line's not as big as I was hoping. It was maybe 4%, which wasn't great. And he flips open the thing. He looks, oh, you still made money. And that was the end of the analysis. And I was going to a real accounting firm. And it blows my mind in hindsight, between the accounting firm and the bank, nobody said to me, wait a second, you're growing 30, 40% a year. You got a 4%, but why don't you raise your prices 3%? It'll slow your growth down a little bit and your bottom line will go up dramatically. You won't have to borrow from the bank. I wish somebody would have told me that. As simple as it sounds now in hindsight.
But you know why the bank didn't tell you that, right?
You could say they want to lend me money, but I don't even give them that much credit. I don't think they were. I just haven't found a lot of these bankers to be great business advisors. I don't understand the accounting firm. Nobody. It seems, like I said, in hindsight, it seems obvious, but at the time, it wasn't.
But Jay, it wasn't just that you could have had a bigger bottom line. You could have had a better life.
Absolutely. No, absolutely.
If I recall you talking about it, there was a certain amount of chaos that you might have avoided.
No, it was absolute chaos.
If the bank or the accountant had given you that advice, do you think you would have been ready to hear it?
I believe so, because when you do the math, it's obvious that I do it for framers, and their mouths drop when I go, let's look at this math. If you raised your prices 10%, how much business would you have to lose money on this deal? And it comes out to like 18%. So even the most paranoid of all of them, even the ones that think they're in the most competitive market, no one can argue with the fact they're not going to lose 10% of their business. And I also say, you'll lose some business. I'm not arguing with that. I'm suggesting if you raise your prices 5 or 10%, let's say 10%, yeah, you'll probably lose 3-4% of the business. And then you show them what the effect it has on their bottom line. And like I said, their eyes open up.
It's totally universal. Early in a business's life cycle, founders dramatically undercharge what they should. They undervalue it. This is crazy. So to your point, Jay, about the numbers, I had a client that was a accounting firm. They were an accounting firm, and we were doing brand work for them, and we were looking at their offerings, which were really remarkable and different, and nobody else could do what they were doing. They had this niche specialization. And we were like, you guys, you're in many cases losing money on these clients. Just raise your prices by like 10% and you will kill it, especially because they had a volume. They had a volume of clients. And they were like, oh, no, we can't do that. We can't do that. So there was just like a fundamental insecurity because they were comparing themselves to the kind of boring tax industry, which just prepares returns, which is commoditization.
I don't know if I'd use insecurity. I would use the word, I think there's two words because I've thought about this a lot, fear and guilt. I can't charge. Oh, people can't afford that. Really? They can afford $300, but they can't afford $350, or fear of, oh my God, I'm going to lose all my business if I raise my price. And like, I get it. I've been there. It's fear.
I think part of it too is the discomfort of communicating a price increase, which in the last couple of years, my business has done. And I think a lot about either communicating it or in some cases not communicating it. Whatever the choice is, but, some people have a discomfort with communicating a price increase.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say most people.
I mean, I think Liz is kind of the perfect example. I was on your website, Liz, and I was looking at your trash bins because I got this project. And I was like, maybe I could use a trash bin thing. And I was like, wow, these things are expensive. And that was my first thought. And then my second thought was like, well, wait, okay, what do I do? Pay to have a custom thing built? what else is there? Like, there's no comparable, right? So you've created something that is escaping the trap of being a commodity, which is great. And it also means you're going to have some people who won't buy from you. And that's fine.
Yep.
Like, that's fine, right?
You have to get used to the idea people don't have to be happy with the price. They just have to pay it. That's not the same thing.
Right.
You go to get your car fixed. You know what they're getting hourly? Like $280 per hour. Who gets their car fixed at the dealer and says, oh, that was reasonable, $493? I mean, but you pay it because you want your car fixed or the plumber or whatever. So,
or you want it to last. You know, a lot of the commodity trash enclosures you would get at Home Depot or on Amazon, they're going to degrade very quickly.
Total garbage.
Or to Shawn's point, you can hire a local carpenter to build something in ePay that's really nice. Well, with that person, you might need to wait a really long time. And it actually, in many cases, will cost more than a Citibin because people also underappreciate the cost of good, carpentry.
Yep.
And if you want it really nice, it is going to cost a lot.
Next topic. I want to talk about succession a little bit. Both Jay and Shawn, this is a thread we've been following a little bit. You guys have talked about this in previous episodes, and I'd just like to check in with you. Jay, you've told me recently a few times in private conversations that you've kind of settled on a succession plan, which is your plan is you can't die.
that's a key part of it, yeah. It's the key element.
Can you explain that for us?
My plan requires me being around long enough to mentor and to groom and to get people ready to run it without me here. I do have the place somewhat running itself. I've got key people running each division that are extremely competent, in some cases more competent than I am. But there's still an element, I still do serve some function here. So I am working on I've got my 2 kids here.
You've talked about that as being kind of an experiment. You wanted to give them a chance to see if they were interested and if they have the capability.
That's why I can't die. I need to find that out because things could change in 10 years. Well, things could change in 10 years, but I'm working on it and I'm continuing to work on it. And I need some more time to get this working. And then the other difference is, I'm in good health, I believe. Hopefully I'll be around for another 25 years, but if I drop dead tomorrow, would the place go to? No, it would be okay for a while. It might be okay at long term, but there's definitely some holes here that I'm grooming my children to understand the finances and, frankly, some of the stuff Liz brought up.
Jay, what would happen if you got hit by that proverbial bus tomorrow? How would big decisions get made?
First, it would be an unbelievable big funeral with people just throwing themselves to the ground.
Jay, we'll all be there.
Yes,
we'll throw the 21 hats on your casket.
Yeah. So, for those of you old enough to remember this, would there be an Alexander Haig moment? Remember that?
I'm in charge.
I'm in charge when he really wasn't. Would there be some power void? I've got some strong managers here. I don't think there'd be any ugly someone's trying to take charge thing. Would there be over the next year or two? We do have a plan here, which is we're not opening any new stores. We're just running what we have, running it better, trying to get more efficient, trying to get more profitable, and just running what we have. Would anything change with that? No. And I am I'm explaining to everyone involved, whatever happens, I've got it all typed up for my kids that don't do the, dad's turning in his grave thing. I don't want any response. Do what you need to do. If you decide to sell it, if you just do whatever you need to do, I do not want to hang my kids or my wife with any kind of legacy thing where they torture themselves the rest of their life because, oh my God, Dad would be upset if he knew we were. I don't want any part of that. So I'm telling him, I'm giving him some instructions, some guidelines, some thoughts. In telling him at the end of the day, do what you need to do. If you wake up one day and you don't want to deal with it anymore, sell it, do whatever you need to do. So it's a work in process. There is no easy solution to this.
Shawn, when we last spoke, you had told us that came a point in time where you tried to step back a little bit and turn over the kind of day-to-day operation to your team. And that eventually you concluded that wasn't really working and you had to get back involved, which you clearly still are. What's your current thinking?
Yeah, some of that's a function of, losing a key person on my team that was responsible for business development. So my strategy had been, get out of client work, get out of doing the advising and consulting business. And I was successful in doing that. I built a really great strategy and consulting team. They're fantastic, good leadership, good execution. And so then really kind of the next natural step was to get out of sales and business development, which is really hard for a founder, owner, because oftentimes they've been doing that for so many years that it's hard to kind of pass those reins. I had been in probably year 2 or 3 of that, specifically, kind of cultivating somebody inside. And I think the pandemic really threw everything off, made life really hard for all of us, including her. And she ultimately left, which is a bummer, but I understand it. And it's just meant, I just don't have any redundancy in that department.
Wait, walk us through that. Why'd she leave? Tell us what's the rest of the story. Where'd she go? Why'd she leave?
Yeah, it's a complex issue, but I think fundamentally she's an extrovert. She's a community person. She really loves and thrives on being around and with people. And I think the pandemic and its isolating nature was really hard for her. And, we closed down the office. We went remote, and I think as that dragged on, it just was really, really difficult for her to be inspired and excited to do her job. And
so what's she doing today?
Yeah, so she took a role at a much, much larger company, more in the 300 person size, doing a lot of stuff around, kind of internal employee alignment and engagement. It's really kind of an internal brand role, which is something that, we deliver to our clients and are known for, and they really need.
Okay, so that does make sense. No, that makes sense for her. What I've learned is when you get to the stage where you really have a self-sustaining business of size that I have nothing to do with the customers, you have to have people in place that are going to be making some serious money, and you have to have a big enough business to afford that because that's not a $60,000 a year employee anymore.
Well, yeah. And so that's another tension. So we were growing really, really fast, up through, from about 2011 through 2017. And that's exciting because it creates new opportunities for people in the organization. And then I really wanted to focus on more stability. We were having, I think, higher employee turnover than I liked, higher client turnover than I like as a result of that fast growth. And so I slowed it down intentionally. I got it to about a 10% a year growth curve, which was great. Really sort of like that perfect balance of stability, but with growth.
Did you slow it down by raising prices or just by bidding for less work?
Both, raising prices, that's some of it, but more it's being disciplined in the sales process to bring on clients that you felt could go 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years with us instead of clients that were marginal. Like when I was in that fast growth mode, I would take a lot of clients that in my heart of hearts, I was like, this is not going to be good. And then what would happen is it would bring a lot of stress to the team, which would cause turnover within the organization, which then caused more client problems, which then caused more employee problems. And it was this vicious cycle. Developing the discipline to say, okay, we're not going to say yes to those clients that, your gut tells you should say no to. That was the primary thing.
How long have you been in business?
About 23 years.
All right, here's some good news for you. That's not that long a time. It really isn't. I mean? I was figuring it out at that point, but it's like I can't emphasize enough. I've been doing this for 44 years. It makes a difference. You could be in a very different, not could be. My guess is in 10 years, you're going to be in a very different place and you will have fine-tuned the niche and it'll be a well-oiled machine so that when you're in your 60s, you have some choices.
Shawn, where's your head at now? Are you still thinking you'd like to pull back a little bit, or are you, happy re-engaging?
I mean, I think what the business needs from me right now is what I'm best at, which is, major transformation, significant shift in how we go to market and how we talk about ourselves and the services we offer. So I've been thinking a lot about that lately, and that's energizing for me. I really enjoy it. And I really like the team we have.
So you're not doing it reluctantly. You're throwing yourself into it eagerly.
It's a classic, I felt like we took 2 steps forward, and now it feels like 1 step back, and that's okay. That happens. But I think I'm more. The piece about it is I really love creating prosperity for my employees. I really love watching them buy houses, get married, have kids, have long-term relationships, have great vacations. I love seeing that. Like, to me, that's happiness. And so this feels like a little bit of a setback from those kind of outputs, just because the pandemic was so hard on our marketing. It's meant that, I was okay with the slow and steady, but it's like, the kind of flatness that we have right now is frustrating because I like to see prosperity amongst the team. It's not about me getting more money or, it's more about being able to have impact and to do more good.
Okay, wait, I need to stop you there. Well, but there is a part of that making more money. You're not a non-for-profit.
Oh, sure.
Are you a monk or something?
No. I'm not one of those owners he gets up and says, money doesn't matter to me. It's, I hate those people.
We're getting close to that when you said it's not about. I just wanted to clarify that because I know I've learned from the last one, the West Coast thinks differently than Chicago. I just wanted to clarify that.
Well, but what I've heard you say many times, Jay, is like you've reached a point of prosperity in your life where, you've got all this real estate, you've got a business that's humming. You don't need to like make a ton more money.
No, you're right. No, my goal is no longer, yes, there's no question.
It's different than saying what I really find disingenuous is when people say money doesn't matter to me, even though they're saying it from a position of massive wealth.
Right.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I have reached a point of prosperity where I'm not like looking around going, gosh, how am I going to achieve this or pay for that or save for this?
Okay, and that's good to know because that's all part of the, I love when people say we don't put profits over people. And I think, really?
No.
I would say that people and profits got to go together because at some point without the profits, the people aren't paying their mortgage. So it's all right. Just want to keep it real.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. Whenever somebody uses that expression, people over profits, I'm like, that's a false choice.
Yes.
Right. That's a false dichotomy because, that's the nonprofit mindset, which is like, oh, well, we're doing a really important mission, so we're not going to pay you anything. And it's like, well, how wrong is that, right? Like,
so I would say this though, there are moments where there have been cases where I did have to choose the people over the profit, which there are times where you can do that, but you just can't do it generally overall because at some point you do need the profits to stay in business.
I think that what I'm saying about nonprofits is they will sometimes build that into their model, like where they underpay their people with the reasoning that, well, we need to fulfill our mission. And it's a really dysfunctional industry because they'll use things like, well, this % of our revenues goes to the mission, right? 90% of our donations go to the mission, which means that you basically are staffing the organization with either really young and inexperienced people or folks who are incompetent. And I think that's a real miss on the nonprofit sector. And I think some of it's starting to weave its way into the for-profit sector where you get this like people over profits messaging, which people aren't actually giving a very deep thought to, which is like, well, the least impactful organization is the bankrupt organization. So let's be honest here and like make money so you can do good.
Right. The point being, there's nothing wrong with making money. That's the point. It's not evil.
Jay, you're it's the outcome, not the income guy.
Yes. No, and it took me a long time to figure that out, that I see lots of very successful people that I want no part of what they call success. I don't think so yes, and income is clearly part of the outcome, but it's more nuanced than that. It's about your income. It's about your employees' well-being. It's about your customers' well-being. It's about society's well-being. It's about, do you feel good about what you do for a living? And I see, unfortunately, the people that get a lot of publicity that are in business are doing some horrible stuff that I want no part of.
I'm going to resist the temptation to ask you what you're referring to.
You shouldn't have to ask.
He's talking about me. He doesn't want to say it, but he's talking about me.
Liz, I'm curious, is succession and the related issues on your radar at all, or are you putting that in the box with the unopened mail?
It's mostly in the box with the unopened mail.
Which perhaps it should be at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I have a 16-year-old daughter, and I want her to, go to college and have some work and explore the world, travel before, posing this idea to her. I think
But
that's
you're thinking about it.
I do think about it because I want her to have it as an option. If it's, a lucrative business that she would want to take over, definitely she would have that as an option. But, it's more important for her to, experience life as she wants to than to be tied down. The only other way I would say I sometimes think about it is, Frank and I own 100% of the company. We love it that way, but we do have an excellent team of employees. So I do sometimes think about some sort of a succession that would involve them, whether it be taking over ownership or just taking over completely running it. I don't think a lot about that, but in occasionally when I think, oh, maybe we should break our 100% and share with employees, I want to do that, but I do think it would legally and everything just be too complicated for where we are right now. And I think that there may be other options that come into play. I mean, if we potentially, are to be acquired, I don't take that off the table. I see that as a possibility. That is a form of succession or at least of exit.
Everything you said makes perfect sense to me. I think that's a very well adjusted, maybe your daughter, who knows? Maybe she'll find that exciting. Maybe she wants nothing to do with it. The whole equity thing, I 100% agree with. I would warn anybody and I've been in this position where I thought, oh, maybe I'll give some equity to, the second you give 1% of equity, you no longer have control. You might think you have control, but you're open to lawsuits. And I've hit situations where, thank God, my lawyer, who was my brother-in-law, I was going to give equity to some guy. This is 35 years ago. It would have been a nightmare because it blew up with him and I had no idea. And my brother-in-law says, you just don't do that. And he was right. So I think what you just said makes perfect sense. And I think you don't have to make that decision today. You can wait and see how it all falls out.
With our daughter, we find ways to engage her with the business. So she's done some marketing work, some social media, and she also actually has done some videos to our factory in China that illustrate changes that we want to make to the product. So we shoot the video, give it to her, she'll edit it into a video, transcribe it, and then actually have it translated into Chinese. And that was something that I think we paid her like $400 for a month ago, and that moved that project forward so fast.
Wow.
I think you're getting a pretty good deal there, Liz.
She sounds like a future vice president. I think there's a vice presidency in this.
Meanwhile, social media, what an advantage to have a 16-year-old around for that.
Maybe.
They teach kids a lot of new skills. And I mean, not a lot of it is learned on their own, but I think some of this editing did come from school.
Shawn, what was your maybe?
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, yes, from a technological understanding. Yes, from a content creation perspective. But it all depends on who your audience is, So what goes into that content? And I'm not dissing on what you're doing, Liz, at all in any way. I know other people are listening to this and I'm like, I have seen that happen before. I have seen folks do that. Like, well, this person's young and knows stuff, so they'll be our new marketing person. And it really depends. I mean, it depends on who your buyer is. It depends on what your buyer cares about. And there's no like one size fits all. And I think we're going to see more of that. Like, I don't know what TikTok is, so I've got a kid doing this stuff for me.
I think you are 100% right. And the problem with some of these younger people, some of them, they think that everybody thinks like they do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just not the way it is. Everybody doesn't think like they do, and they completely ignore the existing market and just do I would never do. Oh, I buy everything online.
Like Liz is a good marketer, so that's fine. Like I don't have any problem with her model at all. I think the challenge is that sometimes you get owners who actually are not that good at marketers and they think the answer is to hire a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
And you really need somebody to oversee that.
And just to be clear, I do have a full-time person doing marketing, but in a pinch, she's got good ideas and she's got good skills. And if we have to turn around a video in 2 days, she can do it. Whereas an employee, I am not going to have an employee like work late at night or work on a weekend to do something that needs to be done quickly.
You can't underpay and overwork employees, but you can do that to children. It's great.
If they're your children.
Yeah.
Next topic. Liz, last time you were on, we were talking about your first ever brush with some bad publicity after a local blog in New York City reported that your trash bins were not faring as well as expected in Times Square in a pilot program. At the time, you told us You feared you had a couple more stories coming, one in the New York Post, one probably in the New York Times. Tell us, how'd that turn out?
So there were subsequent articles in the New York Post and in the New York Times. The New York Post was definitely a hit sort of piece. I would say pretty mean-spirited, as they tend to be. It definitely made me feel awful. It actually was worse than I thought it was going to be. I was really nervous that it would be bad, but it felt a lot worse than it was worse than I thought it was going to be. So that's like the negative side. Then a week later, the New York Times article came out, and that was amazing. It talked all about the objective of containerizing trash and clean curbs, which is the whole point here. It wasn't critical of the product. It was really praising what the objective is here. They had a lot of really good photos that showed the product not in Times Square, in another neighborhood, which is more residential, where the bins look very pristine, and they've been installed there for about 5 weeks. And I think probably the best part of the Times piece was the last sentence, which was, "The rat did not get inside the Citibin, but had died trying." And that really made me feel good.
You couldn't have written that better yourself.
Have you considered the rat's family, really?
I really loved that. And the Times piece was just so much more informative. It talked about, garbage remediation efforts in New York City over the last couple of 100 years. It had all these historical photos. So it put it in the context of, this city bin is not the silver bullet for the city. Nothing is. It's never been. And so we were really able to see, we're part of a pilot program. That was another thing that was a big takeaway, is that if I fixate on the things that are wrong too much, and there are a few things that need to be improved, then I really forget that this is actually an opportunity. Like, who gets to test their product for a year with a city that realized it's a pilot and is going to be tolerant of making changes and improvements using real users? So if someone tried to come out of nowhere and do what I'm doing, they wouldn't have the user base to give the feedback that will then help improve the product. So I really felt like I was able to kind of take control of the narrative to say, this is a pilot. If the bins are being overstuffed, this is what's going to happen. But we are going to be working on improving that, because we need to plan for user error. We can't just say, oh, it's because they're overstuffing the bins that all the juice is there. We need to say, well, we realize this is an issue and we're working on drainage and different latches. So, I'm really happy with where things are right now. I would say, though, that emotionally, it really was difficult for those 2.5 weeks. I was really like a roller coaster.
How did you take control of the narrative, Liz? What did you do to emphasize the points that you wanted to make?
So I really focused on what the problem is. So the problem is trash.
You talk about with the reporter from the Times, or? From
the Times, yeah. So the problem is trash on the sidewalk. That's why the city has this whole program called Clean Curbs. This is something that, instead of having the trash on the sidewalk, they're in the bins. It's a huge improvement. Does it solve all the problems? No, it doesn't. Like, I personally think the trash needs to be subterranean like they do in Europe, but that's like a whole nother thing. It's not something that I think I would ever endeavor to do. But, really taking control of the narrative by saying this is a pilot, and we're looking for feedback from everyone. Times Square is definitely a scenario that's probably, if we could say, the worst case scenario, but these are going into many other neighborhoods where you're not going to have the volume of trash like you do in Times Square.
Liz, this is all very recent, but you've been through this spate of publicity, some of it bad, some of it very good. Have you seen any impact on the business yet?
Yes. So we have a number of other business improvement districts that have moved ahead. This was just on Saturday. We got a lot of calls on Monday and Tuesday. Some prospects that we had talked to before that were on the fence that actually did move ahead. I think the other thing that's come out of it is that we've also gotten offers of support from other potential vendors or, Shawn introduced me to an industrial designer that I had a great conversation with. So people will come out of the woodwork to see we can help that company. Even advertising on Citibins was not something I had thought much about, but anybody that's in media and media sales sees a Citibin like a canvas for an ad. And I think there's something in there that could also be a revenue stream for Citibin eventually, maybe not immediately in New York because it is a pilot and we don't want to taint it by coming in with ads. But those are the types of potential partners that come out of the woodwork when they see this. And I like that.
That's so cool. I mean, to think like I could see business improvement districts where this could be a self-funding mechanism, right?
Yes, definitely.
Oh my gosh, this is great, Liz. Such good news.
All right, real quickly, one last thing. We have a question that came in from a listener, somebody who's interested in starting a handyman business, something you know about, Liz. You had a handyman business, a platform for handymen before your current business. He's struggling to finance it, and he writes, so I have the knowledge and willpower to build this business, but I hit a wall and can't find the financial means to get me going. Should I just get my last paycheck and go for broke? Yes, those are his actual words. I guess the question really is, when do you know it's time to quit the day job and just go all in? Liz, do you want to take a crack at it first?
Yeah, so I left American Express to start the handyman company. And it really worked out well because I got laid off kind of in the tail end of the recession in 2011. And I had already had my business plan written for about 2 years. And I already had started interviewing handymen. So I was like, I had this locked and loaded situation, which was really good. When I got laid off, I also got a severance and I got unemployment. So financially, I felt like I had a runway, and that was really, really helpful.
It sounds like the layoff was a dream come true. Did you do anything to encourage that, or did that just happen?
I would say it just happened, except the last couple of bosses I had, I wasn't fond of. So I'm sure that they could have put in a negative word about me, which they probably did, and that hastened it. It wasn't an intentional thing, but I just didn't really fit in culturally. Yeah, it did work out. Now, the other aspect of this with the handyman business, I would say, is that I don't know if he plans on doing the work himself, but you really have to love that work. You have to be good at it, and you need to like it. And if you're going to hire other people, you need to know what to look for in an employee. But perhaps the most important thing is that I think handyman businesses have an opportunity to distinguish themselves on service in terms of customer service. So everything from the point where a direct mail to how we answered the phone to what our website looked like to how we followed up with clients, even the guys when they went into homes, we had a procedure on how they laid out their work cloth, put their tools on top of it, because I observed that was something that previous clients had complained about, was that some of my handymen would come in and just throw their stuff all over the place. So we learned that if we just had these small touches that distinguished them from all of the other chuck in a truck, that it made the business much better. It was something that when you read the Google and Yelp reviews that people really took note of. And that's one of the things I loved about the business, because it was actually relatively easy to distinguish us from our competitors.
What are the things that this listener should be cognizant of or aware of that are the hazards?
Wrecking something, they don't know what they're doing, and they go to hang a door and they wreck the whole door frame. And next thing you know,
there are definitely a lot of things that could go wrong. I think with hiring people, that was probably the most difficult thing for me. Probably the number one reason is that I'm a woman, and some of these guys were like, who the hell is this woman with a few tools thinking she can run a handyman business? Like, I encountered that over and over. I wasn't entirely surprised, but it definitely inhibited things. I think it sometimes inhibited me from getting and keeping good employees because they...
Wait, how did you know that? I mean, people tell you to your face, or are you just surmising them? How did you know that was the problem?
Eye rolling, body language. Definitely, if I was interviewing a guy and he kind of made a half smile mockingly, I knew what that meant.
Interesting.
And there were quite a few of
I'm
them.
not doubting that. I'm not doubting that was the case. I'm just wondering how that became evident because.
Well, and then the other thing is if I hired guys that had previously been union, they were never happy with the pay or how long their lunch hour was or any of these little things that I was a startup. I was not like an established company that had a big union, sending in guys. I always had some difficulty with them. And then I'd be like, well, you know how much the pay was. Go somewhere else if this doesn't work for you.
Going back to the decision of whether to give up the day job, you kind of had your hand forced. The decision was made for you.
Yeah.
What were you thinking? Do you remember what you were thinking at the time? What would have triggered your going out and starting a business on your own if that hadn't happened?
I probably would have done some active moonlighting on the side. So let's say maybe taking one job a week, maybe on a weekend where I could really see how it went and if I actually liked it or not.
That was going to be my advice. There's no reason to not just work Saturdays, Sundays.
Yeah. So I think that if I had to have gone that way, I would have tried it. And I really liked the business, honestly. I really only got out of it because Citibin, I was doing both businesses and Citibin was growing a lot faster, as well as, I like product more than service. I realized that pretty quickly. With something like a handyman business, and this is something for the listener, the number of variables on every job is mind-boggling because you have a different client with a different house, with different requests, what they want to have done, with different materials that need to be bought at Home Depot, with a different handyman that could be going in. So you've got those 5 variables that you don't have on a job that's longer term, but this was usually handyman for a day was my main product. So on every job, there would be those 5 different variables and things could go wrong very easily.
Well, I think the person has a great opportunity to start out small, do some things on the weekend. If I was the customer, I'd feel, oh, great, I'm paying less because it's a side gig, no problem. I don't think that would turn off a lot of customers and get going a little bit because maybe they're going to find out they don't want to do it because that's a tough job.
I think there's huge opportunity in the handyman business if it's done right. And I really think we were doing it right. We were the only woman-owned, licensed, insured, W-2 employing company in all of New York City. We had a very strong brand. We had very strong reviews, but it does take that sort of, you need to have the marketing hat as well. And I don't think most tradespeople are good at marketing, but I am. And that really helped as well.
I've never heard anybody say, oh, there are just too many of these great handyman services. I can't decide which one to use.
I agree. I think it's a gigantic, huge, very enticing market.
After talking to many people that go into business, my conclusion is it requires 3 things to go into business: marketing, management, finance. And the people that I know that are successful are really, really good at one, like gifted perhaps. The second one, they're really strong on. And the third one, they're adequate. The people that go broke are the ones that the third one, they can't deal with it. And I don't know how you can run a business and just completely have no skill set whatsoever or no attention to one of those 3 things. And everybody needs to do some self-analysis before they go into business and say to themselves, should I be going in business for myself? Because as we know, the failure rate's very high. Anyone disagree with that?
No. And I've let this already go way too long, so I'm going to stop there. My thanks to Shawn Busse and Jay Goltz and Liz Picarazzi. As always, thanks for sharing, guys.
Wait, don't leave yet. If you have a question or a comment that you'd like the 21 Hats owners to address, send it to me by replying to your morning report or by email at lauren@21hats.com. That's LOREN@21hats.com. Do it now before you forget. And don't be afraid to tell Jay what you really think. You can take it. And if you got something out of this conversation, help us reach more business owners. Tell a friend. Subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to the Morning Report at 21hats.com. This episode was produced by Jess Thuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Okay, now you can leave. Thanks for listening, everyone.